Major Garrett and Steve Chaggaris join us now from Des Moines, where CBS News will be hosting tomorrow night's Democratic debate. Major, first to you. It was so fascinating to watch this take place last night. Donald Trump has really been sort of Teflon Don. Nothing has stuck to him so far. Do you think that last night's tirade could be different?
I do. I don't think many Iowa Republicans can look fairly at that speech and say to themselves, there's someone who we should entrust with the nomination of the Republican Party for president, and there's someone whose temperament is prepared for the rigors of the White House. Now, Donald Trump has given speeches somewhat like this before, but last night was sort of a full-on assault, not only on his Republican challengers, but on sort of the underlying frustrations it appears he is feeling with politics. And politics does grind you down over a course of a campaign. That's one of the challenges of running for president. You have to keep your wits about you and your demeanor acceptable to voters, even when you're tested the hardest. The ironic thing is that Donald Trump actually isn't being all that tested. He's still a front runner with Ben Carson. He hasn't had to spend much money. He draws huge crowds with almost no effort involved. So he's not really being tested, yet it appears he's fraying at the edges, not just rhetorically, but in his own temperament and the way he is presenting himself to voters. And if I've learned anything in my travels through Iowa, through many presidential campaigns, people here demand two things: a lot of face-to-face retail politics, but also a sense of, if not quietness about yourself, at least a sense of humility and openness to an exchange of ideas, and to not overcomplicate things, just general Midwestern niceness. It really works here. That was incredibly hard to find last night in Fort Dodge.
Yeah, Steve, a similar question. You know, one of the ongoing concerns has been whether or not, first it was because there were so many candidates, and if they started to criticize each other, it would damage the Republican Party, like what we saw happen in 2012 with Mitt Romney, that after being attacked through the primary race, it really hurt him in the general election. But now we're seeing Trump really sort of take the gloves off there's a lot of loose talk and a lot of insults. And I'm wondering if this is something the Republican Party needs to be concerned about. Is this something that could damage them once we move past the primary and move into the general election?
Well, it's not really new for Donald Trump, the insults. I think the two things that sort of are red flags for me on this, and I'm reluctant to say this is going to end Donald Trump's presidential campaign, but there are two red flags. One, Major mentioned the Iowa thing. This is not maybe not the best place for him to have that kind of speech. Iowa is a very unique place, and I think the voters here expect a different kind of demeanor out of their candidates. But secondly, he's going after Ben Carson, who is very, very well liked among Republicans and Republicans in Iowa. And you know, his previous targets, Bobby Jindal, Rick Perry, Lindsey Graham, Republicans don't care if he's insulting those people. They were getting single digits in the polls. They were not real factors in the race. Ben Carson is a guy who is polling almost equally to Donald Trump, and there are a lot of, he has the highest positives of any of the Republican candidates right now. And so for him to go so hard against Ben Carson, that could be problematic for Donald Trump.
And there's really no state in the country where Ben Carson and his campaign operatives have been longer than Iowa. The Run, Ben, Run movement was here in Iowa long before it was anywhere else, and then it morphed into an actual presidential campaign. They're deeply organized all across Iowa, and Ben Carson has a very strong attachment to this place. And for that reason, I think Donald Trump moving down the line of implying that there is something diseased or pathological about Ben Carson outside of the story of his own personal redemption, overcoming a violent streak as a child and becoming a successful neurosurgeon, but implying there's something much darker around that, I think could be very problematic for Trump here in Iowa.
Major, I'm curious, you know, you've covered a lot of elections. Have you seen anything like this before with Donald Trump?
No, but I mean, that's been true since he entered this race. I mean, there is nothing about Donald Trump's campaign, his ascendancy, his resilience, his absolute mastery of the manipulation side of the media, and his practiced unwillingness to adhere to any of the conventional modalities of politics. None of it makes any sort of sense in a historical context for me, which is what's been fascinating about this campaign. The one thing I will tell you is that unconventional approach does appear at certain levels responsive to the desire of Republican voters to have something completely different, to push away the establishment, which they have felt has underperformed and in some cases betrayed them. So that is one reason why Trump has worked. But a lot of the other things around the Trump campaign have largely left me befuddled.